So an in-depth assessment focusing on 11 priority countries has found that judicial independence in Africa is under severe strain as many countries grapple with challenges that pose threats to the integrity of the office. Some of the issues included in the report by the Africa Judicial Independence Fund include political interference and corruption. Let's bring in Africa Judicial Independence Fund Manager, Saeed Salahudeen, who's joining us now from Accra in Ghana. Saeed, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think talk to us about the Africa Judicial Independence Fund and why it was important to run this particular study.
So thank you so much for the opportunity. The Africa Judicial Independence Fund is an initiative of Afrobarometer. It is born out of the pressing need to address the numerous and complex challenges facing judicial systems in Africa. Afrobarometer has been conducting surveys across the continent, and we have come to the realization that our survey results continue to point to citizens' lack of confidence in the judiciary. And that was the background to the formation of the Africa Judicial Independence Fund. The fund is set up to support existing and ongoing efforts on the African continent to strengthen judicial independence and to help situate the fund for the most impactful interventions. The Afrobarometer Secretariat commissioned a landscape scan to understand the current state of judicial independence in Africa so as to provide the most impactful interventions.
Okay, so I'm really keen to hear how you rated South Africa and judicial independence in South Africa, because it is an ongoing discussion here in our country around just how independent our judiciary is. Where have you rated the independence of South Africa's judiciary?
So in terms of the landscape scan that we've conducted, South Africa judicial independence is ranked high among the peers. We've evaluated, for instance, the appointment system. The appointment system is such that if you look at the Judicial Service Commission, it makes up of about 23 members. The processes to appointing judges to the Superior Court of Judicature in South Africa is not vested in the executive. You realize that various arms of government, various individuals and institutions are all involved, and the process is such that all of these people collectively are engaged in the process. So the appointment process is very robust, and we realize that even Kenya has also mimicked the appointment system that South Africa has. So in terms of appointment, it is very robust. Another thing that we saw from our research work has to do with the fact that there were instances that the South African Constitutional Court was bold to strike down a provision that allowed the president to appoint the Chief Justice even after the person had reached the retirement age. These, we thought, were very good examples for other countries to emulate.
Yeah,
so South Africa is not doing badly.
Yeah, so but what you have looked at, though, with South Africa is how, for instance, the appointment process for judges of the Constitutional Court involves the President of South Africa appointing judges, excluding the Chief Justice and Deputy Chief Justice from candidates shortlisted by the JSC. So, and that's always going to be a talking point, particularly here in South Africa. The President, of course, having just given a green light to the JSC's recommendation of Mandi Samaya, for instance, as Chief Justice or incoming Chief Justice here in South Africa. But even after that recommendation, the President not quite following that instruction by the JSC. Is there any sort of red lights that your fund does see in that process? Or red flags, perhaps that's the word, yeah.
So this is not alone. our research findings point
Saeed, I'm
to...
going to just ask you to start that thought again, because I lost your line there for a moment. If you start that thought again.
It's not limited to South Africa. We have noted that several African countries, the executive continue to influence the other arm of government, which is the judiciary. We've noted several instances where the executive will want to influence the judiciary through appointments, through promotions, and other physical threats. So those are there. That is not limited to only South Africa. That is why there is the need to ensure that the appointment system is not vested in one individual or one body. If that occurs, then it will mean, particularly when the appointment system is vested in the hands of only the executive will always want to advance their political interest. And for that matter, vesting appointment of superior and even lower court judges exclusively in the executive will undermine judicial independence.
Yeah.
Yes, that is there, but when you make, it doesn't mean that everything is fine in South Africa, but when you compare the situation of the other African countries, even the South African system seems to be better than most of the other African countries.
Okay, that's an interesting assessment. So you looked at 11 countries: Kenya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, South Africa, Uganda, Senegal, Angola, the DRC, Ghana, Zimbabwe, and Mali. Perhaps talk to us about some of the worst performing countries and what we learn, what lesson we take from them.
Because of coup d'etat. So when you have a country that democracy in itself is threatened, constitutionalism is not there. Now, there is no longer the rule of law, it is the rule by man. So these countries like Mali are such that even the judiciary is under a physical threat. We have noted an instance where a district court magistrate in Mali was abducted from his home. So there are physical threats. These are the kind of things that we are picking up. In Kenya, for example, in 2018, an opposition lawyer was deported in spite of a clear court order opposing his deportation. If you take Uganda, for example, imagine an election dispute brought to a court. The judges have all looked at the case. One of the judges felt that she wanted to give a dissenting view. She was physically prevented from reading her dissenting judgment in court.
Sure.
When she persisted, the lights in the court were turned off. Later on, she was made to face disciplinary action. And then finally, she was removed as a judge. These are some of the interesting findings that we are finding across the continent.
You know, that's quite a perspective that you've given us, right? And I think that certainly in South Africa, we're quite critical of our judiciary, and you've given us, you know, a bit of context to understand just how bad things really can be. What are the recommendations that you then put on the table?
So, as I said, even though comparatively South Africa is doing well compared to the peers, it doesn't mean that everything is fine. However, there is still a big room for improvement. And these recommendations I'm going to mention is not just for South Africa, but for other countries.
Yes.
Often than when we talk about judicial independence, we focused on the external threats, like appointment, like promotions. But the number one threat to judicial independence are the internal dynamics. We have noted instances where even the head of a bench tried to influence other members of the bench in their judgment. These are matters that we need to be aware of. We need to ensure that even when people of high moral character and proven integrity are appointed, it doesn't end there. They must realize that when you ascend to the seat of judgment, it's like ascending to the throne of God, and you must do everything possible to ensure that justice is served to all manner of people.
Right.
So we are recommending that there must be some collaborations, regional collaborations between the Southern African zone, the West African zone, the East African zone, so that these judges from time to time can come together and share ideas. Those that are doing well can help the others emulate from them. Those that are not also doing well can also learn from them. So there must be these joint collaborations, not just okay.
Apologies, I'm out of time, but I think that's such a beautiful way to end it off, right? The call for judicial knowledge exchange on the African continent. Could we possibly see the justices of the Court sharing knowledge and exchanging ideas with leaders of the judiciary on other countries on the continent? Thank you so much for speaking to us. Really refreshing and enlightening conversation with the Africa Judicial Independence Fund manager, Saeed Salahudeen, speaking to us there from Accra, Ghana. You're still